Greetings, programs, and welcome to the Awesome Friday Podcast, the podcast where we talk about two new movies. My name is Matthew, and I'm your host, and this week we are talking about Dune Part Two, How You Dune, and also The Monkey Man from Dev Patel. Joining me this week is Simon, as is usual. Say hello and good morning, Simon.
Hello, good morning. I'm looking forward to a week's worth of Dune 2 puns that you've had storing up. Please don't stop them coming.
I mean, yeah, we are going to talk about Dune Part 2. We're really doing this right now. So, but in the meantime,
I got nothing.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, how are you today? We've been off for 2 weeks. What have you been watching and up to for 2 weeks? What's the best thing you watched in the last 2 weeks?
Well, neither of the movies we're talking about today. Do you know what? I watched for the first time. I watched 10 Things I Hate About You, and I loved it. And obviously as a Shakespeare person, I love what they did to incorporate that story into a modern format. And in the same way that I loved Anyone But You, I thought it was a similar kind of very open, very knowing interpretation. I really enjoyed that. And what's really nice is that I've got, as you know, as you well, my 9-year-old daughter is quite independent, and she is she latches on to any like counter-establishment female lead like with both hands, and she does not let go, and she wants to become that person. So she every time Julia Stiles is like sarcastic response to something, like because Julia Stiles is this highly educated, like verbose, great with language, and this is everything my daughter wants to be. She's a complete bookworm and she loves language. And as soon as it finished, she's like, when are we watching this film again? And like she would not accept, oh, soon. It's like, I need a date and time when we can watch this film again. And since we watched it, she's asked four times to watch it again. And I love that. And also reminded me that PG films in the 90s were much ruder than PG films today. Tons of like overt sexual references and sexual jokes, and I feel like PG films don't do that at all these days. And just the right age, I think. My daughter's 9 and my son's 13, and they both really enjoyed it. And just as chemistry class, Heath Ledger and Julia Stiles, just like, that's why you do chemistry reads, which I gather is not a big thing in casting anymore. But it's just such a pleasure to see them bounce off each other, and knowing how much they loved each other as people out of set as well. And and man, having to go. My kids always want to know, like, what else has this person done? I'm like, and having to tell them that Heath Ledger died was just really brought home what a loss that guy is as an actor, and how needless that was. And he's just brilliant. And everyone's brilliant. And the guy from Numbers, my wife was like, who's that guy? I recognize that guy. It's like the Numbers guy.
You mean David
Krumholtz? Right, is that his name? Because he's great. Yeah. He's really great. And
I think we're officially allowed to call him that guy from Oppenheimer now, just for the record.
Is he in Oppenheimer?
Yeah, he plays Isaac Rabbi, the sage.
Oh, of course he is. Oh, fucking hell.
He's also Bernard from the Santa Claus franchise.
Which I've never seen. Sorry.
You've never seen any of the Santa Clauses? Well, you should see the first one. See the first one.
Not seen any of the Santa transformation era of movies. I have not watched a single one of them.
Huh, interesting. Anyway, Krumholtz is excellent, and I think he should have been up for Best Supporting Actor for Oppenheimer, but that's a whole other discussion.
I now know who exactly you mean, of course. So I really enjoyed that movie, and I feel like it's a bit of a little bit of time travel to when they made films like that. They really don't anymore. Like really intelligent, witty teen comedies just don't seem to be made anymore. They're either really, really schmaltzy or really, really stupid. And to have one that's so intelligent and so like electric, it was wonderful. And we all loved it. And I'm going to show them Bring It On next because I think they'll love that too. How about you? What? We also finished watching The Three Body Problem, and that's something that finished for sure.
Did you? So you finished watching Three Body Problem?
Yeah. Well, if you could call that an ending, sure.
We are only 2 episodes in, I think.
Okay.
So, but I didn't. It hasn't grabbed me so far, and also I didn't really get on with the book, so I'm sort of.
It's fascinating to me what they have done to transpose the book from written to a TV show, and of course the book is.
And also from China to the West.
Yeah, right, well. Exactly. And the book is about these giant sci-fi vibes where the people aren't. It's not really a person-centered book. There's lots of moving parts, and it's more about the greater thing that's happening. And the TV show focuses much more on singular characters, and it deviates hugely from the book. So you might like it, but it's
kind of curious to watch. They actually made a miniseries out of it in China 2 years ago as well. I'm pretty interested to see that at some point.
It was randomly on cable a couple of days ago, and I watched a little bit of it. And it was definitely way more like technical response than their sort of Game of Thrones-ified version of it. But I don't know. My wife really, really enjoyed it. I kind of watched it over her shoulder.
Here's a question. Do you say Game of Thrones-ified knowing that it was adapted by the Game of Thrones people, or just because that's the vibe you got?
I haven't watched Game of Thrones to know that. I've heard that from a lot of people that I know watch a lot of Game of Thrones. They have pointed out the ways in which stylistically it's so similar. But I'm no expert on that whatsoever.
Interesting.
Although this is a complete tangent, I had no idea Natalie Emmanuel was in Game of Thrones until yesterday.
Really? That's where she got her big break. That's where she got her. That was her big break. Was in. I
really like her as an actor, and I saw a clip of her yesterday. And it might be time to watch Game of Thrones. Is what I'm saying. Maybe it's time.
Maybe
there's a lot of people that I really like that I had no idea were in Game of Thrones, and then it turns out this was a huge springboard for them as well. So,
well, part of that at least is that like by the end of Game of Thrones, if you had an accent, you were basically in Game of Thrones. So, and the people who weren't in Game of Thrones are now showing up in House of the Dragon, which is the Game of Thrones prequel show.
Right.
So it's
is that any good?
I'm very excited for that show to come back. Yes, it's very good.
Oh, yeah. All right, wicked.
It comes back in May or June. I can't remember which, but I'm excited to see it. It's the same but different. It's hard to describe, but it takes place over a much longer time frame, even though it is. There's only been one season. It's taken place over a longer time frame, to the point where they had to do like actor switches from like children to teens to adults.
Cool.
So,
could I watch House of the Dragon without having seen Game of Thrones, or would it not work?
No, it would work. It would work.
Okay.
Yeah. There's definitely things that like. There's things in House of the Dragon where you can tell that it's stuff that has been mentioned in Game of Thrones, but they're never like winking at the camera. There's nothing you ever have to have seen. And it's also really interesting because Game of Thrones takes place like so far after House of the Dragon. I can't remember the time frame, but it's like 300 years or something, or 100 years. It's a long time anyway. And at one point, the entire history of House of the Dragon is recapped on Game of Thrones, and it's like one scene in one sentence. It's like, oh yeah, this happened. This conflict happened. Is like the way. So it's really interesting how that's been adapted. I like it.
Ah, cool. All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
What about you? What have you randomly watched that we won't be talking about today, but really impressed you? That you're able to
so I watched, and it's kind of cheating, but I watched for the first time, and I've definitely seen this in bits and pieces before, but sat down and watched for the first time from front to back. I watched Presumed Innocent Harrison Ford and Bonnie Bedelia.
Oh my god, that's such a good film.
And like, yeah, like turns
Oh,
out late 80s, early 90s, Harrison Ford made
oh
some
man.
good adult dramas.
Yeah.
And like that movie has a bit of a reveal at the end that I won't spoil here just in case, but like,
Oh,
and
so
I knew it was coming, but like that whole sequence, the whole scene where it is revealed is so good, like
so
easily the best scene in the movie. And I'm saying that as a movie
yeah.
that predominantly features Raul Julia, who I
Mm,
watched in the last couple of weeks. I've watched this and The Addams Family, and we're talking about like losses to the art.
mm,
Raul Julia taken way too soon. That guy is so compelling in everything he does, everything he did, I guess. That
yeah, it's a real shame.
it's interesting because with Presumed Innocent, like I think Harrison Ford is good. Um, I do wonder if maybe he's maybe not exactly the right casting choice, but he's so different than anything else I've seen him in, and
Mm-hmm.
there's some moments that require him to be sort of like vulnerable on screen that he's not the best at. But he's so good at the rest of it that it doesn't really matter, which is a really interesting thing.
I think he's perfect casting for what that film has to do, and there's absolutely no way I can justify that without completely spoiling major parts of that movie.
I mean,
But
it turns him in from like the usual. I think it's interesting and good casting because it does sort of require him to be the opposite kind of character that he normally played, which is good because
I saw that. Yeah,
he's a simp for the woman he's accused of killing, and it's and like a total like the worst kind of puppy dog man for her, and it's an interesting choice, and I think overall I think it works. I think there's a couple of scenes where I'm like, this is not really working in this one particular scene, but overall I think it works. I think it works great.
I didn't know what that movie was about. I had no knowledge of it, and I saw it quite young, so it must have been quite early on VHS, I guess.
Mm.
And
It came out in
it's
1990, so
right.
probably.
So that's one of the films that really opened my eyes to what you can do with a film narrative. Because really, up to a certain point, I was watching things beginning, middle, and end with a happy ending, and the good guys win and the bad guys don't. And there's a couple of films that were like, well, what if you told this story in this way? And I remember quite clearly being pretty blown away by Presumed Innocent for a
Mm-hmm.
number of reasons. We'll do a
Yeah,
spoiler cast on it one day. It's great fun. I'd love to rewatch it.
it's also one of the ones where you realize that like we only really remember Bonnie Bedelia for Die Hard,
Mm-hmm.
but she
Mm-hmm.
is so good in this movie.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's an excellent. I'm glad. Like I say, I've definitely seen it, at least bits and pieces of it before. It's one of those ones that like I logged on Letterboxd as never having seen before because it's either been so long or I've only seen bits and pieces and I couldn't tell you. Like
Mm-hmm.
it might as well have been new. I guess is the way to put it. And then I also watched Barbed Wire this week.
Wow, that's from one side of that spectrum to another.
Well, what's interesting about I said this on socials. I think I texted it to you as well. Is that like sometimes I wonder why we still pay for a cable package, and the answer to that is that occasionally I will turn on the TV in the middle of the night and something like Barbed Wire will be on, and I'll be like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna watch this." And the problem with Barbed Wire is not that it is bad. The problem with Barbed Wire is that it is not interestingly bad. It's just
Mhm,
boring. It's
mhm.
like and it's frustrating too because like there's some interesting production design choices, and the cast is kind of great. You know, there's a lot of like
Mhm.
'90s character actors in that movie, and it's just not very well written. It feels like, and maybe this is Pamela Anderson's fault to some degree, but honestly, not really because every scene feels like it's the first take of every scene, like not just hers, and it's
It might well
definitely
be.
like leering at her boobs throughout.
I'm,
Um,
yeah.
so like if you want to see like Pamela Anderson's body, this is the movie to watch. Um, but it's honestly the problem with it is not that it's bad; it's that it's boring. So it's not
Mm,
like It's actually relatively like standard in a lot of ways. It's just, but not interest. It's just not interesting in any way, shape, or form. Even if you're a fan of, mid '90s Pamela Anderson, who is Service of the Sun attractive. It's is an interesting artifact of that era for sure.
Wow, I will seek out that.
No,
How many stars did you give?
Don't lie to me.
I like trash though. I'm getting increasingly more into trash.
If you want to watch some trash that I think is worth watching, there's a movie that came out in 1995 starring Denzel Washington and a pre-fame Russell Crowe called Virtuosity. And that is some glorious, interestingly bad trash.
That's the Strange Days era of The Matrix, but not, isn't it?
Yeah, Russell Crowe plays an AI called Sid 6.7, who is taken out of virtual reality and placed into an artificial body, and Denzel Washington has to chase him around a city. It's not good, but it is so like 90s, interestingly 90s bad as to be entertaining to watch.
I need to see who directed that because that will define whether I go running to it or not.
I could not tell you the name of the director off the top of my head. But like, I think I wrote a letterbox this time that I watched it because I've seen it before. That like, it's not a good movie, but at one point Russell Crowe does an Elvis-esque dance whilst live remixing an electro rock orchestra that is made up of recordings of his victims' screams. So sometimes it's amazing.
Oh, sounds familiar. This is the same director as The Lawnmower Man. So yeah, sure. It's good to know he didn't really go too far out of that. I don't like Jeff. There's something about Jeff Fahey that really creeps me out. Just there's something about his eyes, which is why he's probably perfect for that film. Not that
you know what it is? It's because he's creepy.
Is he creepy? I don't know anything about him in real life.
I mean, he just. I don't know about him in real life either. Creepy. I just know he looks creepy.
Super creepy guy.
I'm. You shouldn't watch Lawnmower Man because it has your favorite actor in it. But you should watch Virtuosity because it's a really interesting 90s artifact as well.
Okay.
And then just to round things out, I also, for the first time, watched a Clark Gable film called They Met in Bombay, which was a delight.
How much brownface was in They Met in Bombay?
So honestly, the more troubling aspect of They Met in Bombay was not so much the brownface, which was definitely there and annoying. But Peter Lorre plays a Chinese ship captain in maybe the most egregious yellow face I've ever seen. And I've seen Charlie Chan movies with, so like, holy shit. It's, yeah. I put a photo of it in one of our group chats. If you didn't see it, you can go back and find it. But it's rough. But hey, that was 1941 for you.
I was just wondering if it's worse than Mickey Rooney in Breakfast at Tiffany's. I feel like
it's worse. It's so much worse because the character that Peter Lorre plays in this movie is also played as like very stereotypically like sleazy and conniving. Like the two main characters are on the run, and Peter Lorre's character like makes a deal to turn them in, and is very like,
wow,
yeah, like it's not great. It's problematic would be the way to say it. But it's I don't know. It's on TCM, and it was just, again, another one. It was just on. I'm like, oh, I guess I'll watch Clark Gable. I'll watch that. And it's Clark Gable and Rosalind Russell, and they play a pair of con people, confidence tricksters who are at the beginning they're on the lam, and in the end they end up like happy and married and having done the right thing. It's a delightful, breezy little film from 1941.
Huh.
And it's kind of one of those movies too that's like three movies in one. Like the first third is a con story, and the middle third is them on the run, and the final act is them like finding their place in the world and being happy. And I don't want to spoil it, but like it's a fun little movie, and I'm glad I watched it.
Lovely.
So,
nice.
movies now more than ever.
I just want to do that all the time. Really, I just want to watch movies all the time.
Yeah, I did, of course, watch some other things, but those other things are under embargo, so I can't explicitly
Yes.
say them. But I will say that I cannot wait for. I think it comes out this week, so I think I need you to see Civil War so we can talk about it. Because,
Oh,
yeah,
right.
if you're gonna make time to go to the movies this week, I would like you to see Civil War because I want to talk about that movie a lot.
I see. See what I can do.
Yeah. Anywho, well,
Okay.
we should
Well, shall we
probably
talk about this week's movies?
yeah, we should talk about this week's movies. So we're gonna start with, and I'm gonna let you. Actually, no, I'll run through the plot of this one.
Okay.
This one is not totally new, but Simon has just had the chance to catch up with it finally. So we're going to talk about Dune Part Two from Canadian director Denis Villeneuve, um, which picks up immediately after the end of Dune Part One. Like literally, it's just the next scene. You could watch them back to back without a title sequence, and that would be fine. The House Atreides has been destroyed. The Lady Jessica, played by Rebecca Ferguson, and Paul, played by Timothy Chalamet, have survived. They become integrated with the Fremen culture under the leadership of Stilgar, played by Javier Bardem. And we finally sort of meet and get to know Chani, played by Zendaya. And they spend most of the movie integrating into Fremen society as the Harkonnen oppressors come back and take over Arrakis and, I guess, brutally oppress the populace. Um, if you have not yet seen this movie, I don't want to spoil anything, but most of it has to do with Paul knowing what he has to do and wanting and rejecting that thing, and eventually them winning in quotes in the end. I I don't know. Is that that's about as short a summary as I can give of this movie because
Yeah.
it as with
That's
the
fine.
first one, it is super dense. I have talked about this film before over on the Lambcast, which you can go and listen to if you want to hear my more in-depth initial reactions to it. But now, a couple weeks later, I still think it's a really good movie. I cannot wait for the opportunity to watch Dune's Part One and Part Two, and now that we know it's in development, Part Three back to back to back, um, because I feel like that will be a more rewarding experience than watching them separately, and because I feel like the adaptational choices in this film are some examples of some of the best. What am I trying to say? Some of the best, like, again, adaptational choices made in a recent film. Like, instead of trying to just cram everything in, it makes some very, very pointed choices about what to include and what not. And it also makes some big capital C choices in order to further illuminate the themes that the film is going for, to the point where Dune Part 2 is more accurate to the themes of Dune, the novel series, than it is to Dune, the book itself, which I find fascinating and honestly good. Um, and I cannot wait to the end of the movie leaves it in such a place that I I just can't wait to see what they're going to do when they adapt Dune Messiah into Dune Part 3, because the ending, although broadly speaking ends in much the same place, on a more micro level many of the characters are in much different places than they are at the end of the novel, and I cannot wait to see how they deal with those choices in the next film. But I'm going to ask you, Simon, what you thought about it, because I know that you were not so hot on it, and I
Um,
think you're in the minority there, but not certainly not alone. Lots of people have found
no.
it and the first one to be a little on the emotionally cold side, would be, I think, the polite way to say it, including me the first time I watched the first film. So, how do you feel about this film, We Dune?
June, June Tunia. Electric Jubilee. The visuals in this film are incredible. Let's just start with that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's still worth seeing. I saw it in IMAX, and I think the color palette is a little bland, I have to admit, but it's on a desert planet with lots of metal. So, I mean, What are you going to do? You can't just. I do like.
I'll tell you what you can do.
Sometimes.
I had this discussion with someone online the other day who said that like it's fine because they're on a brown desert planet, and my response is that like yeah, but they could have a brighter green every once in a while, or a brighter like. If you're on such a harsh world, wouldn't you want to have maybe brighter colors in the things you do? Like, anyway, this is a whole other discussion that I could link back to. Like, we have this idea that the Romans were a very austere people, but actually the marble statues we see today were brightly colored at the time. But anyway, I'm getting aside from myself.
I want to talk about the positives first because visually it's fantastic. The visual effects are incredible and completely integrated into the picture. So there's no shitty CG discussion in this film because it looks real. It just looks real. Villeneuve is really good at that, and he always has been. And to clarify what I'm going to say, I love Villeneuve's other films, and many of them elicit very strong emotional responses from me. Arrival, in particular, what I think is a masterpiece, emotionally and visually and technically. Absolutely love Enemy, even though, like, beyond it just being a JKG movie, I think Enemy is an incredible, incredible film. Blade Runner 2049, I think, is better than the original Blade Runner. So I love this filmmaker, and I love his films, and they really make me feel things. And at the end of Dune 2, I felt the same as the end of Dune 1. I visually stunning, but again, I feel like I sat and waited for 3 hours to feel something. And I think the script is not very good in terms of the potential. I've not read like the books at all. I've read the first couple of chapters of the first Dune and was really blown away at his style of storytelling. So I do want to get back to it. I think the potential, the ideas in this story are amazing. I absolutely fucking love the comedy of this immortal set of, for want of a better word, witches, like controlling everything from the back. Like there's no size and there's no rush. They play their game. The Bene Gesserit like can manipulate their own genes and their own cells to get exactly the children they want, keep the bloodline going, and everything's a manipulation. Everything and everyone is just part of their game. And so I want to see the look on their faces where someone reports back. It's like, you know, that religion we made up to control these desert people, you know, just keep the wanting for desire. Oh yeah. Janice made it up. She was pretty good at creative writing, so she just made up a religion. And the facts that they're like, oh well, it's coming true. Like they found their Messiah and they think it's true. They're like, what? But the thing we made up is coming true. There is a lot of humor there that I would love to see. I'm not sure if it's in the books, but I love this idea of this completely fictional religion being made up to control the set of people, then coming true and being used as a weapon back against them. Like, how cool is that? It's really, really cool. And I'm
just going to interrupt you really quickly because I want to ask, when did you last watch Dune Part 1?
When it came out on digital.
Okay, because some of what you're talking about is a little bit explained in Dune Part 1. Some of it is.
Their reaction to Paul becoming the Messiah by the Sand People?
No, but just like why the myths are put in place.
Okay. Oh yeah.
On Arrakis, like the and how they then it's not given like a ton of depth or anything, but like it's made very clear that like once the Bene Gesserit know that the Atreides are going to Dune, like they start like putting it out there that like, you know, so it's not just their fake religion. They take parts of like Fremen mythos and start like basically implying that like, oh, theyese could be them, right? Like,
right.
They're more manipulating it than creating a whole cloth, like you're implying.
Oh, okay, all right. But my point stands that they're just making all this. They're piecing together all these myths for their own like manipulation gains, and then suddenly it's coming true. Like that's really interesting to me. Paul as a character, he turns out a bit of a dick. Who knew?
Anyone who read the book, that's who.
This is interesting though, because my perspective is I have not read the book, so my context is only what the film gives me. So it's a nice parallel to what the book, how the themes of the book are taken, which is your angle. But this idea of this guy openly encouraging this mythos so he can use it as a weapon against the people that killed his dad. Fascinating. And the sacrifices he gives up for that as well. I just don't think the movie told any of those ideas in an interesting way. And actually, I didn't think it was dense at all. I wanted more density. I didn't think the script was the kind of script where everyone says very important things in complete silence and then moves on to the next scene. And the only exception being Javier Bardem, his little quips about things, which was lovely. I mean, everyone's fine in it. Everyone looks very attractive. I've never seen Austin Butler in anything. I still haven't seen Elvis, although his first line when he's introduced is like 100% Elvis. It's very funny. The rest of it isn't, though. He's great in this, and I like Zendaya.
I saw him give an interview where he talks about very openly trying to do, like, to affect a voice similar to what Stellan Skarsgård was doing, which I found was very interesting.
Yeah. Rebecca Ferguson is a great actor. I really like Zendaya. I like Timothée Chalamet a lot. I just felt I felt nothing. This film elicited no emotional response from me whatsoever, and it was like this might be too far, but it felt a bit like watching a 3-hour, like, you know, those fragrance commercials you get at the front of Vogue, like. If like everyone's gorgeous in sand, and the funniest thing I've taken from this movie is anytime I do anything good around the house, and what's the name of the Messiah? Lisan
al-Gaib.
And there's at one point whenever Timothée Chalamet like drinks poison or he sharpens his knife, Javier Bardem goes, "Oh, listen, like it's a sign, and it gets like intentionally funny that they're feeding this Messiah worship against every little thing he does. Again, it's another really interesting exploration of how religions can sort of avalanche, snowball when you start seeing the signs you want to see. Again, I'm sure the book has that in depth, and I don't think the film had the depth that I was really looking for. But these films are not landing for me at all. Like, I don't feel anything from these films. Nothing.
It's interesting because, and to be fair, it's been a minute since I've read the book, but like Stilgar going like full-blown fanatic so quickly is an adaptational choice in the movie. Like he's not, he gets there, but he's not like immediately like Lisan al-Gaib. And just for the record, you should be saying that to your son every time he like does a chore. Like every time your son does a chore without being asked, just be like, Lisan al-Gaib.
Takes his plate to the kitchen. Lisan al-Gaib. It's as written.
Yeah. So I think it's one of the choices in the movie that I really appreciate. That like they really do try to hammer home that like people are getting swept away in this religion. Like the thing about the religion being effectively like, if not created, then co-opted by the Bene Gesserit, is also made a lot clearer by the idea that like there's no like southern region in the book with like thousands of fanatics. It's just like it's just the planet Arrakis, and everyone on it becomes a fanatic. Like there's no sect, and like at the end of the novel, at the end of the movie, you know, Chani leaves, and at the end of the book, she's by Paul's side. Like she understands. I don't want to spoil it, but like there's a lot of choices there that make the setup for the third part very interesting. And I think if the movie's narrative suffers in any way, it's because, and this is part of the reason why I say watching them when I get the opportunity to watch these two, and in particular 1, 2, and 3 when it's out, back to back to back, is that the first book is just the first act of Dune, and the second movie is acts 2 and 3 of Dune, and then Dune Messiah is basically the epilogue to Dune, and I can't wait to see it in its completeness, because I feel like if you didn't watch Dune Part 1 within proximity of Dune Part 2, then like you're missing their setup, you're forgetting, because there's so much happens in that movie. Um, and the other thing is that like the whole theme of Dune is very much that like messianic figures like getting caught up in cults of personality is a bad thing. And many people read Dune and think and come away thinking like, oh, Paul's the hero. But like the best meme about Dune that I've ever seen is one where it's just the front covers of Dune and Dune Messiah, and they've been retitled Paul is bad, and I guess I wasn't clear about this. um, because I think one thing that the film makes a lot clearer is that Paul at least knows, in the book it's not 100% clear, he knows that there's only one way through. And in the movie, it's clear that the one way through he sees leads to devastation, leads to him starting something he can no longer control, and the galaxy burning as a result. And the thing you're talking about with the Bene Gesserit and that, like, them having these, like, centuries-long plans that are suddenly coming true and coming to fruition are interesting, because I would say the one thing that that these two movies, at least, don't make clear, that I think the third one does, because I think it's actually in the text of Dune Messiah, is that Paul is a generation earlier than they predicted. That, like, they were expecting, like, the Kwisatz Haderach to arrive via Paul's children, not via Paul himself, which is why they made such a big deal of Jessica having a boy instead of a girl baby. Like, they wanted to, like, the combination of like a Fade Routha and a female Paul to make another child would have made the Messiah figure they were expecting. So I feel like a lot of these things are going to come home to roost in the third one, is what I'm trying to say. But ultimately, the whole theme of Paul knowing that what he's about to do will lead to massive destruction and billions and billions and billions of people dying is a lot clearer in this movie than it ever is in the book. And the second book and the third movie take place like a decade later, and 60 billion people are dead, and he can't stop it. Like, it's very clear that he's the bad guy, and I can't wait to see how they deal with that.
So Dune and Dune Messiah, you talked about Messiah being an epilogue of Dune. So are Children and God Emperor of Dune, are they separate things entirely? Is that a different story?
No, not at all. Dune, there's Dune, and then Dune Messiah. Dune Messiah is very short, and it really is just it's a book unto itself, but it is an epilogue to Dune, basically making clear that, like, anyone who thought that Paul was the hero at the end of Dune, the first bit of Dune Messiah makes clear that, like, nope, he unleashed a galactic jihad, which has burned planets and killed 60 billion people. And he can no longer control it, and everyone is pitted against him at this point. Children of Dune concerns his children, shockingly. And then Dune Messiah jumps 3,000 years into the future, where one of his children has been oppressing humanity for 3,500 years. And that his son, Leto the Second, who's the God Emperor in the fourth book, is he's been oppressing humanity for 3,500 years in order to save humanity, but it's very much on theme with like he sees the golden path, he sees the way through, he sees the way that humanity will be saved, but he has to be the worst tyrant in the history of humanity in order to accomplish that. Like, he's not the good guy. Like, even if he has good ends, he's not the good guy. So it's
almost like Herbert had a theme in all this.
Well, part of the theme is that, like, and one thing I would say that another thing that's not really made 100% clear in this movie, it's made clear that once Paul goes to the place and drinks the water of life, like, he's already having exposure to the spice in the first movie, like, awakens his prescience, his ability to see into the future. And then there's a moment in the second movie where he basically does a thing, and he gains the ability to, it's made clear he's given the ability to, like, basically read people's minds, read their hearts, and he accepts the mantle of Lisan al-Gaib. But one thing that it doesn't really make clear is from that point he also gains perfect prescience. Like, he's able to see into the future and clearly see what's going to happen. And the other sort of theme of the Dune series is that to know the future is to be trapped by it. And most of what comes in later books, especially in God Emperor, is that Leto has taken over the Bene Gesserit like breeding program, except instead of trying to create the super being, he's trying to create someone who cannot be seen by prescience. He's trying to free humanity by creating people who cannot be predicted. And it's a really interesting theme and a really interesting story. And I don't think they're going to get all the way there with these movies, but I hope they get through Messiah, because that's the start of it.
Do you think it's fascinating listening to you talk about this? Because obviously you've got all this knowledge from the book series, and it makes me want to read the book series because it sounds so much more interesting to me than what I saw in the films. Do you think subconsciously you are enjoying the films more because you're able to fill in the blanks that I'm getting from the films because I have no other context that didn't leave me satisfied? When you watch the films, you've got this knowledge base that you can fill in the gaps that the films aren't giving.
I mean, I try not to, but maybe. I don't know. It's like there's definitely other stuff that's left out of the book out of the movie that I kind of wish was there, that lends depth to different parts of it. But I would say that the choices that Villeneuve is making, not just in terms of what to include and how to change what's included, but also what to leave out, is important.
Mm-hmm.
And there's stuff that from the books that isn't in these movies that is very important that they're going to have to wrangle with at some point. I feel like I'm rambling and not really answering your question.
No, you are. No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my follow-up question to what you're talking about is: are the Villeneuve movies weird enough? Because Dune is famously a very weird book and has lots of very far out ideas. And by all accounts, the Lynch version and the unmade, the Polish guy,
Jodorowsky,
was a spectacularly weird treatment of these weird set of books. Are the Villeneuve movies weird enough, do you think?
I mean, they're pretty weird. The whole universe is pretty weird. I think that it does a good job, and again, comes down to like adaptational choices, but like I think it does a pretty good job of leaving out the things that don't matter. So, and a lot of that is the weirdness. Like, I don't know how they're going to do this. Like, they haven't mentioned to this point, for example, the Spacing Guild, the group of humans who have a monopolistic control over the transit between interstellar bodies, and who are also hugely addicted to spice to the point where they are physiologically mutated and don't look like humans anymore. I do not know how they're going to do that in the third movie without any context from the first and second.
Can they just leave
super psyched to see. But they can't because like the Spacing Guild plays a much more direct role in Dune Messiah. And I'm sure they could just like have a representative instead. But like it'll be a little disappointed if we don't see like fish people swimming in a tank of spice, you know? Like it's another thing they don't really go into, like in the first movie they do have Stephen Henderson plays Thufir Hawat, who is the Atreides Mentat. And in the books it's made clear that like there are no computers, right? Like there's no computers because of 10,000 years before there was an AI took over, and then there was a 1,000-year-long war that like they finally defeated the AI and they just banned computers. So people had to train themselves to basically be computers, and that's what his character is. And this movie doesn't talk about that at all. Like these movies don't address that at all. Wow. And I think it's an interesting choice because like it's made clear that this guy can do like complex calculations in his head and is an important character, but it also like it's interesting trying to adapt that in 2024 where like some of the like spaceships and things have to have computers, right? But like how do we, I don't even know where to start digging into that because it's such an interesting problem. And I think it's a smart thing to do to just be like, this shit just exists, and to not address it at all. Because it ultimately, it doesn't actually matter to the themes that Villeneuve is clearly trying to illuminate. Like, none of this matters. Like, a lot of the really weird shit doesn't actually matter. At least not yet.
Do any of the books cover the AI war from 1,000 years ago? Because that sounds cool as shit.
Yes, some of the prequel books that were written by Brian Herbert, which are all terrible, do cover that. And you should not read them. They're terrible. I'm not usually one to say don't engage with art, but like Frank Herbert made this amazing universe, and Brian Herbert inherited it, and instead of doing his own thing, he's just been writing more and more shit in his dad. Anyway, you know how like Christopher Tolkien has been like the steward of J.R.R. Tolkien's estate, and like has tried to like shape the narrative and manage licensing and all that kind of stuff, but hasn't really like dove in and like tried to fully like reshape it to his own will. Brian Herbert has done that. He's written like so many books to illuminate stuff in the Dune universe that just does not need to be illuminated, and it's really disappointing.
Yeah, I've had that a lot. How many stars did you give Dune to in the end? What did
4.
you land on? It's 4, wasn't it?
Yeah. You?
I if we were giving halves, I'd give it 2.5. And I go back and forth between 2 and 3. And I think purely on the massive scope and the technical achievement. It's a massive technical achievement. I think I'll give it 3 stars. But really, I don't feel any need to watch these films again. They don't make me feel anything like excitement or terror or trepidation or wonder or anything. And I feel disappointed in that.
I will say that I definitely felt that way the first time that I watched the first one. But I found rewatching them to be very rewarding. Because like you mentioned that you didn't think they were super dense. But I disagree. Like, shit is never not happening in these movies. And there's no wasted frames, and there's lots of stuff that like passed me by the first time I watched the first one in particular. And picking up on that nuance, I feel, is really, really, really rewarding. So maybe that's Stockholm Syndrome. But the first time I watched the first movie, I really didn't care for it. And every time I have rewatched it a number of times now, and every time I do, I gain something more from it. So I think that in and of itself is a bit of an achievement. Although, I mean, you could argue you need to be able to watch it the first time and get it. Not that I didn't get it, but like, I think that. Anyway, I'm just saying that I think that these movies will reward multiple watches in a way that is a little deeper than most films are watching multiple times.
I might agree with you with the first one. I felt the first one did have a complexity to it, but I really feel like everything was so superficial in the second. All the motivations, all the character work. There was nothing. It didn't dive into really any of it.
That's because it was all in the first one.
No,
it's
still got to be there. Like, you can still have depth even if you've done all your big exposition. You can still have action and movement and plot progression, but everything was just, especially all the religious stuff, which is the fundamental part of this film, didn't get the depth that I think it should have had.
Interesting.
But hearing you talk about the books makes me want to read the books, though, because it sounds like everything I'm looking for is in those books. So maybe I'll put it on the list. I'll make time to read that too.
Yeah. I mean, my recommendation to most people for Dune is to read the first 4.
Yeah, I've had that a lot. And then forget about the rest.
Like, if you're gonna read just Dune, then definitely also read Dune Messiah. It's such a fast read, comparatively speaking, and it is an important epilogue to that story. And if you want to read more, if you want to get like the true depth of what Gerbert's going for, then definitely read Children of and God Emperor of.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the reason I don't recommend going on to the 5th and 6th books is that it was supposed to be 5th, 6th, and 7th, and he died before he could finish it. So the 6th book ends on a bit of a cliffhanger that
Mm-hmm.
Brian Herbert tried to resolve with 2 long books, which are not good. Or at the very least, I didn't like them,
Mm-hmm.
So he's just not the writer his father was, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, Dunes 1 through 4, the books are all great, and you should. Children. I think some people have some trouble with, but like you can't really read God Emperor without having read Children to get the full scope of it, and you should watch them. But we've been rambling now for like half an hour about this movie that I thought we weren't going to talk that much about, so we should probably move on because we still have a whole other movie to talk about.
Yeah. Okay,
so let's do
about
that.
movie.
Yeah, let's talk about Monkey Man,
Okay.
the directorial debut of one Dev Patel. And Simon, why don't you give us the Coles Notesiest version, Coles Notes of the plot?
Dev Patel plays a character just labelled as Kid in the cast. He calls himself Benny at one point as well, but it's pretty clear that's not his real name. And
oh, you mean he takes the name from the cleaning stuff?
Yes,
it's Bobby, and it's like the actual.
Oh, it's Bobby.
name
Sorry.
Yeah,
it's very Kaiser Sose of him. And he is basically all we know really at the beginning is that he does underground fighting dressed in a monkey mask. It's the first scene of the movie is a fight where he gets put pretty heavily on his ass, and he kind of is involved in some very lightweight street thievery for money, and it turns out through his interactions with his latest target that he's completely obsessed with revenge for some terrible family trauma, and he against people, very specific people who have power. And there's the whole of Monkey Man is really a metaphor of the powerless rising up to fight against those in power, those who are corrupt in power, the marginalized groups who are being reduced by capitalist greed and corrupt people. And so he kind of very carefully works his way up through this organization that deals with rich people having as much fun as they can with drugs and with women, and it's very clearly crime-oriented group. And he is positioning himself slowly so he can finally take this revenge. And it's the trailer is billing this as a purely action movie, but there's really only 2 fights in it, and it's actually very heavily spiritual and deals with a lot with his motivations. It deals a lot with his the story. There's a very famous story told to young kids from that culture about the monkey who rises up and protects this woman, fights against power, and it's referenced throughout. And he learns through the help of a specific marginalized group how he should view his purpose, and it gives him, through a rather slightly too long but spectacular training montage, shapes him into the fighter that he's always needed to be. And the first fight doesn't go great for him, and then he comes back at the end of the movie for one of the best choreographed fight scenes I've seen on film, if not shot that way. And we'll get to that in a bit. But there's a couple of kills in this movie that are like all-timers. For this to be Dev Patel's first movie is absolutely outrageous, because it's a little flabby and it's a little scrappy, but the confidence that this film is shot with, sometimes with like handheld cameras. Apparently there's a whole section filmed in iPhones because the camera broke and he didn't have any money to fix it. The absolute audacity of this film, and for this admittedly, he admits himself he's a scrappy, fidgety like kid from London, and for him to control himself and be this just furious, rage-filled, ripped to shit fighter in this movie, and still get across the emotional beats as well, It's a great success as a first film. However, this film would have had a whole extra star, maybe even two, if it hadn't. 99% of the fighting, the camera is an inch away from people's faces, and cuts really, really quickly. And by the end, it's an exhausting film to watch. And by the end, I was just begging for like the camera work in The Raid, where they just pull back and track left and right, because he's doing the work. There's one really important moment in this film where he goes up to a fight wearing the monkey mask, and you think, oh, okay, so he's the star, the stuntman's going to do all the work. That mask comes off, and you see him do the work. Like, he does the work in this film, and the fight choreography is brilliant, but it is all shot so close and so frenetically. It's exhausting, and not in a good way. So that was a deeply disappointing factor, because I wanted to love this film, and I would have forgiven the middle act is about 20 minutes too long. Needs to be edited. There's definitely stuff in here could have cut out and reduced it down, but that would have been a minor factor. If those films had been shot so I could see the fighting they were doing clearly, this would be one of my films of the year, I think. But it's his first film. It's a style choice, and I don't think it helped that I saw The Raid for the first time quite recently, and I'm not a fan of the Bourne Ultimatum style fighting. So,
yeah. I mean, seeing The Raid for the first time casts a bit of a pall over most other martial arts films, to be fair.
It really does.
But I don't disagree with anything you're saying, really. I mean, the biggest problem with this movie... If the biggest problems with this movie are that it's about 20 minutes too long, like, I wouldn't even go that far. I would just say that, like, it's a bit pacey. The pace is a bit all over the place, and in the middle, that's especially true. And that the camera work is, and I've railed on about this on so many other films, that, like, I just want to see them fight. I don't want to have an impression of them fighting. I want to watch them fighting. And this film is pretty egregious for that. But other than that, like, yeah, it's a very confident film in which he's clearly doing all of the work, and if this is his first film as a director, I can't wait to see what he does next. And you're right, like, it's so frustrating, because, like, I already knew, I don't know if you knew this, but I did, that Dev Patel is a black belt in Taekwondo. Like, he clearly knows his shit.
Did not know that.
Yeah, like, competed in international, like, Taekwondo competitions level Taekwondo.
It's just so frustrating.
And the fact that, like, and yeah, the camera work is so close that, like, it's just what I said before. It's like you get an impression of what's going on. You don't get to actually see what's going on. And there's one shot in particular where it's shot wide and steady, and it is such a compelling scene. It's a really starkly backlit shot. It's very gorgeously composed, and you can see that he's doing it basically for real. And I don't know why you would want to obscure that, really. Like, there's one scene in particular where it's him fighting a bunch of guys in a room, and the camera is working around him during the fight. And it would be so much better if they just put the camera on a steady mount and pulled back even like 6 inches, like, and not even just on the steady mount. I would settle for just on a steady cam mount, so that I could see what exactly was going on in these, like, some of which feel like they're probably authentic long takes. A lot of them are probably cheats, to be fair. But the camera work is very interesting and dynamic, and way, way too fucking close. Like, way too shaky. And I get so frustrated by that. Especially because this one, like a lot of them, it doesn't cut all that frequently, there's the two things. It's either that you usually see it's too close, it's too shaky, and it cuts too much. And this one does only 2 of those 3 things, which makes it even more frustrating. That being said, like, that guy is a hell of an actor. Like, he, at 33, he's far more convincing in this type of role than many other people could be, I think. And you're right, the absolute confidence with which this is written and shot. I'm sure because he's in he's an Indian man that I'm sure there's some like political stuff that I am not capable of commenting on because I just don't have the context. But like I need to go and read some reviews from India if it ever gets released there because it's being held up by their censorship board. In terms of like the political party and the way people act and there's a whole middle section with the Hijra, which are a minority group in India of like transgendered people, which is a great section of the movie with a great training montage and a real, like you said it before, like a real spiritual healing and reawakening for the character. And I would not be shocked to learn that that is part of what's holding it up in India because they're so famously tolerant there. And just because, like, you know, he mentioned it in an interview and I saw the comments online, and yeah, people are terrible. So I think this film is fine. Let's put it that way. I think it's totally fine. I think it is more exciting as an indicator where his career as a director and writer and star are going to go than it is in and of itself. I think it's a stunning first effort, and I think it also wears a lot of its influences on its sleeve. Like as you watch this film, there's so many visual touches that are like, oh, that's from Enter the Dragon. Oh, that's from a Bourne movie. Oh, you know, like so many of those. So many of it is just like right there on its sleeve. And I don't think I'm not saying that like it's a bad thing. I'm just excited that there are so many of them and they're from such a wide variety of places. That I literally cannot wait to see what he does next. Which sounds really negative because I think this film is definitely worth seeing, and definitely I'm glad I saw it on the big screen specifically. I just wish that it didn't indulge in my personal pet peeve, which is couldn't see the fighting. And it even has a chance to like thematically to like tighten up the cinematography in the back half, and it doesn't take it. And I just find that really frustrating.
I know, it's right there for the taking. I felt exactly the same.
I don't know. But on the other hand, like it's definitely worth seeing. Like, you know, by saying that I really liked this movie but didn't love it, that puts me in the minority, because most people are loving this movie. Like, you should definitely see it for yourself. Anyone who's listening to this, like, go see this movie. See it for yourself. Decide for yourself. Because most people are loving it, and I think deservedly so. I think it's a great one. A great one to see on the biggest screen you can find it on. And if nothing else, you get a great Dev Patel performance, and you get Sharlto Copley showing up to do the thing he's best at, which is be sleazy for approximately 20 minutes. It's interesting to me that like that guy has carved out a real niche. Is like, oh, we need a slightly sleazy guy with a non-standard accent. Be like, oh, Sharlto Copley, South African, yeah, great. Can you grow your hair out to your shoulders? Yeah. Anyway, it sounds like I'm pretty mixed. I am pretty positive on this movie. I just, like I say, I come down very much on the I liked but didn't love it personally. So
yeah, I'm the same, and that's what really disappoints me because I liked it a lot, and there's a lot there.
I really wanted to love this movie.
Right? From the way I'd heard it described, from the trailer, from Dev Patel, who's brilliant, and the story of it. He barely had enough money to put it together. It was meant to go straight to streaming. Jordan Peele saw it and said, actually, people need to see this on the big screen, and finance the theatrical release. And that's why you can see it in the cinema. So you should go and see it in the cinema.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to, there's everything about this film I wanted to love. And the flabby pacing in the middle was a bit annoying, but honestly, I'm so disappointed about the fighting, because the fighting quality is so good. I just want to see it. Especially as there's two shots. The one you talked about of him fighting, and he's on a bar with a backlit cocktail selection, fighting people left and right on him in a single take, and it's unbelievable. Like, it's amazing. And the other one close to that is it's an overhead shot, and there's people attacking from all angles, and he's in the middle of that shot, and it's a single passive shot, no takes, with him hitting people left, right, and center, like around him at 360 degrees. It's incredible. And what if this film, even that second fight where he kind of gets himself together and he's more focused, what if we'd seen the whole thing like that? I don't think I would have stopped talking about it. And as it happens, I was exhausted from watching this film, and not in a great kind of way, but just trying to keep up with it, trying to see it, trying to see what's going on, trying to follow the geography of what's going on when you're an inch away from everyone's ears. And so if you watch the Bourne movies and think, oh, I like this fighting, you're probably going to like this film fine, much more than I do. But I just can't. I just want to see it. Such a shame.
Yeah.
But yeah, next movie is going to rock. Whatever he does, he is brilliant. Color and emotional beats and action beats and spirituality, like such.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Like this film really does nail the emotionality of the fighting and of the character himself, and like the journey from like rage-filled to centered to victorious. The performances are all good. The what's his name? The Sikander Kher, who played Rana Singh, who's like the main henchman of the big bad, is so good, and his role is like the corrupt police chief. So good as and like menacing, and just effortlessly so. Like there's so much to love about this movie, and I just, like, it sounds like we're coming down very negatively, but it's just this one thing is a pet peeve for both of us. But I would say that, like, again, like, definitely see the movie, like, see it for yourself. Like, we generally like this movie. Like, I'm coming down at 3 stars, and that is a minority opinion. Like, the average, I think on Letterboxd, the average right now is like 4 point something. Yeah. So, like, see it for yourself.
Some of the visuals are great. Like what he does, there's a female character played by Sapita Dulipala. It's a little underwritten, but she plays a pivotal role, and she has a very visual climax to her arc that is, Dev Patel has seen classic horror movies and has decided to paint her in that way, and she looks amazing. Like his visuals in this film, he's going to be brilliant. His films, if he keeps making things that's visually interesting, it could be one to watch out for sure.
You know who else is great in this movie is Ashwini Kalsikar, who plays the like owner of the nightclub where he works at the beginning. And she's so, again, another one who's like so good in the like role of she's like a mid-level bad guy, and when she finally gets her comeuppance, it's I think it ties into what you're saying about this other character being a little bit underwritten, but like that moment is so well executed that you won't care when it happens. You'll just be like, "Fuck yeah, that happened."
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
absolutely.
So like the filmmaking is mostly there. You know, I just kind of wish that we would see fight scenes by the John Wick people instead of the Bourne people. That's all I'm saying.
It's a 3-star for me as well. Devastatingly, this could have so close to being a 4 and maybe even a 5 if we could just see what the fuck was going on. But yeah, 3 stars for me.
Yeah. Good. Good.
Well, yeah, but go see it. Go see both those things. See what you think.
Yeah, I mean, again, like a 3-star opinion is a minority opinion, and like this movie is generally doing way better than that with audiences and critics. So like definitely go see it for yourself, and you might love it. It might be this is going to be someone's film of the year for sure.
Yeah.
It definitely and especially I think if you are of Southeast Asian descent, like it's definitely going to have things to say that you might appreciate. It brings to light things that I certainly wasn't fully aware of, at least, which I think is interesting. And I'm definitely, part of my plan for today after we record actually is to seek out some writing by South Asian writers. I just haven't had a chance to do it yet. So, but as always, like, see it for yourself. So,
yeah.
But I think we're over time, so we're going to wrap it up there.
Let's wrap it.
So thank you so much for listening to the show, is the way to phrase that in English. If you have enjoyed the show, please feel free to, first of all, like, what did you think of the film? Like, reach out. We're on the socials. You can find me at SmatthewAF on most platforms. Tell us what you thought. Tell us, what did you think about things we liked and didn't like about the show, about the movies. You can find us in various places. The show, of course, is awesomefriday.ca. Simon's homepage is temporarypen.com, and mine is stretched.ca, and you can find all of our links and socials there. If you'd like the show, you can also give us some indirect or direct support. The easiest ways to do that would be to like, subscribe, share with your friends the podcast feeds, and if you want to be a little more direct, we do, of course, have a Patreon and a Ko-fi, and all of that will be logged in the show notes. And if you are a Patreon subscriber, you do get a bonus episode every week. This week we talked mostly about film scores, and I thought it was an interesting discussion.
It was.
Last but not least, we are here in Vancouver, Canada, on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. And one last time, thank you so much for joining us on this Awesome Friday.
Bye.